All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special edition of the Rob Brown Show podcast format, and very excited about this one as we get set to kick off the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. First match takes place on Sunday. First match for the red, white, and blue will take place at 2 p.m. on Monday when the Americans take on Gareth Bale and Wales in what I think will be an incredibly important first round match for the Americans. And we'll get into all of that in just a minute. But before we do, I welcome a gentleman that we have had the pleasure of having on the Rob Brown Show radio version many, many times. The first time we've gotten to sit down and go long format with the head coach of the Greenville Triumph. He is a member of the National Soccer Hall of Fame, the first American to play in the English Premier League. He went to won two MLS Cups with DC United. He is a two-time veteran of the World Cup back in 1990 and 1994, and now he coaches and resides right here in the upstate. Mr. John Harkes joins us on the program. Coach, how we feeling, young man?
I'm feeling fantastic, Mr. Rob Brown. I go, you and I, we've communicated so much throughout the season, and it's been primarily, the Greenville Triumph and the USL League and all that competition and everything. And now we are switching formats here to this big platform for the U.S. Soccer Federation and this World Cup, which is coming up, and I'm excited about it. It's a crazy World Cup because of the time of year that is taking place, and I know you and I will get into that a little bit on the show. But I'm excited to be here, man. It's great to be with you.
Well, we appreciate it and looking forward to the conversation. And I mean, let's jump right in. Kind of your background, your time, Coach, as a member of the men's team. I can't imagine that playing on, I call the World Cup arguably, if not definitively, the biggest stage in all of sports, right? Like we've got obviously the Super Bowl is the biggest in America. We've got the Olympics, which takes place every 4 years as well. But the World Cup is probably the most watched sporting contest around the globe. And you had the opportunity to carry the Stars and Stripes on your chest into that event, not once, but twice in the early 90s as an American. And obviously you come from, you are the child of a couple of Scottish immigrants. So I wonder if that kind of melting pot philosophy that we all have about the Americans, did that kind of enhance it? What did it mean for you to carry the crest into the world's sporting event?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rob. I get it asked often, and it's more about that sense of pride that you take being a first generation American player, and certainly very respectful of my parents' background in Scotland, and how they had the courage to leave their country and try to make a living in the States, and they raised us up, and it was amazing. I mean, it absolutely is. You respect your parents so much, but putting the Stars and Stripes and putting that badge on, right above your heart for the first time is a really special feeling. I mean, the emotions, the passion that you have to play the game, to love the game, but to be able to represent your country when so many players are dying to put this jersey on. I mean, to have that humbling experience is pretty overwhelming at times. And I think, once you start to realize, like, wow, I'm going to, play my first game for the national team, or, you play in the U20s and you go through the system of the U.S. Soccer Federation and you compete in all these different levels. When you actually do put the jersey on, it's almost like, all of the blood, sweat, and tears that you fought for to get out of Kearney, New Jersey, and all my great players and friends and coaches that have helped me get along the way. It's for all of them. It's not just for me. It's for everybody, because, that's what you do. And man, I've been blessed. I really have, to play in 1990 and be the part of that first team that gets back to the World Cup after 40 years absence, since the 1950 legendary U.S. team that beat England 1-0 in Belo Horizonte in Brazil. And to get back there for the first time was pretty amazing. And then to host it in 94, 4 years later here was, wow, that was just a dream come true, to do it in front of family and friends in your own country. It's very rare, that you would play a World Cup. Like you said, it is the biggest tournament in the world. It really is, because you can actually say, not like American sports where they say, hey, world champs. Well, you didn't compete against the Netherlands, in the NFL. But if you did, you would be pretty good. So yeah, it is pretty amazing.
So, and that kind of leads me to a thought, and we'll kind of segue to this year's team. Obviously, missing the last World Cup in qualifying, especially the way we did with a couple of really disappointing results at some of the smaller teams in CONCACAF. Uh, can you kind of take a stab at what these guys, especially when we are kind of in this new era with the Pulisics and the Reynas of the world, that a lot of us are very excited about what they're going to be able to bring to U.S. soccer moving forward, to not have the 2018 World Cup, to have such a disappointment and not making it there, and not having a year to send these young guys to build some very early World Cup experience that they could then take to 2022 and 2026 down the line. What do you think it might be like, especially for these young kids, the Gio Reynas of the world? I mean, obviously it won't be the first time that they play for country, but it'll be the first time that they take that crest into a World Cup. What do you think the emotion is going to be like for those guys on Monday when they take to the pitch in a World Cup match for the very first time?
Yeah, it's a big question, Rob, and knowing all the coaching staff and especially Greg Berhalter, and we're friends. Grew up in Jersey. I'm a lot older than him, but still knowing what he is managing right now and going through, it's the emotional roller coaster. It's the highs and the lows, and right now it's a big high, and it's a nervous energy. Going into a World Cup, and it's funny. He's like, people would be critical of them because they didn't play particularly well against Japan in that last friendly or against somebody else. And he's like, Harksey, you know what it's like, at this stage. Like, you want to be part of the group that's going to be recognized and named. So right now everyone's still nervous, and it makes it hard to have that chemistry and to have guys just relax and play. But going in there, I think actually they're going to do quite well against Wales. I think people have been questioning them a long time, like, oh, they're too young or they're inexperienced or they don't have the national stage. But I do think, like, getting together, they're pretty healthy right now, which is good. Um, and look, when they get in there and they're part of that group, I know what it feels like when you're playing for club and country and when you go back and forth. And what that feeling is when you come in and you see everybody from all the different clubs around the world come together in one team. If there is that unity, there is that kind of blend of respect for each other, and you want to hold on to those really strong moments. And I think they have it. I really do. And now look, you as well as I, we talk about how this World Cup in Qatar, at the strangest part of the year in November, right before Thanksgiving and kicking on through December. It's never happened before. But for them, it's really crept up on them quickly. So I think it might benefit them, Rob. Maybe they don't have the time to sit and dwell and worry and create this anxiety. They have to get right after it, get into camp, train together, bring the chemistry together, and then just put it out there on the field. So maybe that helps them being younger like that.
Sure. And I guess, I mean, you kind of hit on it there. One of the things that I was thinking about, concerned about, was leading up in those last couple of friendlies, leading up into the return to the clubs, followed by a very weird, a very oddly timed return to Qatar to get into that camp. There's obviously, and you would know this as a manager as well as a player, kind of a unique set of circumstances as far as building that chemistry. I mean, I was trying to impress upon people with those last couple of friendlies, where I do think that if you were watching it from a we want to win these matches perspective, you probably came away disappointed. But that was really the last genuine opportunity for this team to work on tactics, work on chemistry within them, find out what combination of midfielders is going to work best together, etc. From a manager's perspective, what did you see in those last couple of friendlies that you would have wanted to know? And what do you think you found out, if you're Greg Berhalter heading to Qatar, that you could maybe offset the disappointment of not going out there and winning a couple of those matches 3 or 4-0?
Yeah, it's a good point, Rob. You bring up, and like, it depends. The biggest question is, and sometimes people look at games and they're just super critical as fans, and it's like, okay, but you don't know what the manager and the staff want to get out of this game. Maybe they're saying, let's play a certain way to trial and error, see how we can play in the final third, or maybe are we a pressing team for 15 to 20 minutes against Japan, or maybe we're not. And that's where you gather these answers, in these friendlies. It's just like preseason for us. This year, I want to play more preseason games because I want to give guys more game experience to kind of see like what kind of team are we as we build. So I think the one thing that really stood out to me that the U.S. has struggled, and it's out there, everybody knows, that final third. They're not being able to create enough in that final third. The connectivity isn't there. They haven't been able to pick one specific striker or two and say, hey, this is our shape. Normally, what you do is you have your team strength all down the backbone, right? And then you kind of fill in the pockets of like creative players and how you play in a shape, whether it be 3 in the back, 4 in the back. And so I think in that final third is the biggest challenge for this national team. Who is going to stand up? Who's going to be the one that is the creator? Who are the players that are really going to get down the end lines and take on their fullbacks and get good service into the 18? And then again, who's on the end of it? Who do we recognize that we think, is it a Josh Sargent coming out of Norwich? You know, where one of our players, Jamie Smith, his dad is the manager now, you know, at Norwich. So it's almost like, is it Josh that stands up right now and has that the like moments, the momentum, the confidence, you know, and fills in the gaps? Or is it somebody else? Like, that's the biggest question for Greg Berhalter right now in this national team.
Which is interesting, Coach, because when the roster came out last week, I think the primary discussion was who is going to be that guy up front, right? I mean, do you run combinations? I thought the omission of Pepe and the addition of Haji Wright was kind of an interesting one. And it's kind of one of those spots where, you know, on one hand, you want to trust the manager. On the other hand, a guy like Pepe, who, by the way, somebody that you had to fight to get away from the Mexican national team to get to be on this roster, and then you leave him off the World Cup. You wonder if maybe that would mean he uses his one-time switch to go back, et cetera. There's a lot of things that I would assume Greg Berhalter, pardon me, has to think about outside of the World Cup when making the selection. But were you happy with the selection of guys that are going to get their opportunity up top? And if so, how would you in Greg Berhalter's position try to set these guys up to find that confidence to go into that game against Wales, knowing that, especially with a guy like Gareth Bale, we saw what he did to close out the MLS Cup for LAFC. How would you position these guys, especially when there was so much contention for that spot, to make sure that they know, hey, we trust you to go up there and to finish possession so that we can make sure we are walking with 3 points out of the gate?
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, there are, and look, you and I have talked about it too, even with, you know, club ball. It's like, who are the dynamic combinations that are on the field that make sense? You know, where does this team see Christian Pulisic in their shape? Like, where do they play him? Is he a 10 role? Is he an inverted winger? Is he a guy that's straight up front? You know, he has such a great understanding of the game and grew up with, you know, Giovanni, you know, with Gio Reyna and guys like that. So to me, it's more about, I think that Christian can handle the pressure, but I think that he has to almost kind of play off of a guy like Josh Sargent, you know, a guy that's scoring goals and has confidence and runs and he fights and he has that physical presence. I think Christian kind of balances him and gives them a little bit of that creativity, you know. To me, it's like that's part of the manager's job. You see them every day in training. You know, we're not with them. So there are times in training sessions where for 20, 30 minutes out of a training session, Rob, it might be like, wow, he really connects well with him. Let's see if we can play that, you know, for the next 30, 40 minutes. Let's see if we can play that through. And what does it look like? What does an Aronson, you know, kind of guy look like against maybe Wales? Maybe their fullbacks are a little bit slower. Maybe we push him high and put them under a lot of pressure. And then, you know, conversely speaking, how does Greg Berhalter, if Gareth Bale is on the field for Wales, how does he manage that process? You know, we saw Gareth Bale not really contribute a lot to LAFC in Major League Soccer, but then he comes off the bench in the final, scores the equalizer, and then takes him into the penalties. And it's like, okay, has their money been paid for? Is it worth it? You know, and they win the championship over Philadelphia Union. So it's about the roles. And that's the key part of it there. And it's going to be hard. It really is. It always is. And whether it's against Wales, England, or Iran, Carlos Queiroz is a very good manager, and he managed in Major League Soccer. He's coaching the Iran team. He knows all the U.S. players inside and out, and he knows the international players. He was an assistant coach with Sir Alex Ferguson at Manchester United for many years and their successes. That is not going to be a cakewalk. Everyone's like, "Oh, we'll get the win against Iran. We'll draw maybe against Wales, or we'll draw against England." I'm like, these are all tough games, all of them, and it's going to be difficult. Ricardo, like when you look at Pepe, we have experience with Pepe. He was in USL League One in the first year in 2019. And we were like, wow, what a special young player coming out of SC Dallas' system and playing with their two team and growing up in the USL. And then you look at him and he makes these different moves. And that's the biggest part of it. Like players go, hey, I'm making a big move to go overseas. Okay, but what is your role going to be? Are you going to be playing with high competition? Are you starting every week? Are you behind another striker that's older than you? Is it tough to get your momentum and your rhythm and tempo? That's all of these things that play into who is playing with who. And it's basically about results. Greg Berhalter and his staff look at it and say, can this guy fill in a spot for us? What's the depth chart look like? What if we get injuries or something has to change at halftime? Who's the guy coming off the bench to fill that role? So they see that. They know it better than anybody because they're in there every single day.
That's the big conversation, especially about roster selection, coach, has been about the emphasis on MLS. Obviously, U.S. Soccer wants to promote MLS and try to have that league catch up with the rest of the world. But then obviously a lot of fans want to see more top tier European and Asian development in players before they come play with the American side against the best international players in the world. Where do you fall on that balance, if there is a balance? How important is it to utilize the international team to grow MLS, to utilize international talent playing at top tier on this team? Or is that something that as a manager you would just kind of want to look at on a guy by guy basis?
I think more so, Rob, on the player by player, individually, like where they're at, because sometimes guys are shining. Like just for an example, if you're at like a Seattle team, or you're in a Philly Union or a Washington DC, a Washington DC United team or something like that. Like, what is your role there, and how can I your skill set specifically complement our national team program? And I don't think, look, I mean, coaches, they're emotionally biased. You could say it. They are. And you try not to be, but I'm sure they're going to go like, oh, let's look at the big 5 leagues first, and then we'll go to MLS, and then we'll go to this league and that league. I don't think that's the way that you should coach. I think maybe that's efficient in the beginning and you narrow down some of your choices, but you have to and have the best scouting system that you're watching every player in all their leagues to see how they are producing or not producing, or if they're coming through injuries, or like whether it's Jesus Ferreira, is he scoring goals right now? Okay, maybe not. Maybe in that system it doesn't work well for him. Or how is Tyler Adams doing with Jesse Marsh at Leeds? Has he solidified that position right now? Probably. What's Weston McKennie like in the Serie A? It doesn't, to me, you're in high level competition, which is number one categorically. And then you have to say, okay, but what are they doing? Like most of the time, it goes back to even Bruce Arena. He was like in the 2002, he had so much success in that World Cup, and everybody's like, oh my God, he's playing Tony Senna on the right. Tony Senna hardly even played any games right now. But Bruce just knew him, and he knew that he can actually produce for him in a specific position. He played him almost like a wing right back. And the guy produced, and he did extremely well. And people were like, wow, that was shocking. Coaches just know players. They trust them. And it's about relationships. It really is.
John Harkes is the head coach of the Greenville Triumph, former American national player in the 90 and 94 World Cups, here on the Rob Brown Show podcast edition as we get set for the World Cup. First game on Sunday. The first match for the Americans is going to be on Monday. And, Coach, as we went through the selection process, as we went through the pool, there has been, I think really for the past 8 years, though we missed the last World Cup, there has been an optimism about the young guys, the Christian Pulisic's, guys that we are starting to see appear more frequently at levels like the Premier League, guys that we're starting to see premiere in Serie A, etc. Have you, looking at it from the standpoint of a manager / a veteran of that team, is there and excitement for you about the turning generation, the new fans, and if so, or the new players, I should say, and if so, what are you looking for? What are you expecting? What are you wanting out of them to show American soccer fans that we really have hit another gear with these young players? Like, what does a World Cup? I mean, obviously, the ideal answer is we go win this thing and shock the world. But what do you want to see as individual players out of this next generation in this World Cup to know that we have really formed that foundation of younger players moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Rob. I think the number one thing you look at is that there's no hesitation with them. There's no indecision process. Like, oh, there's no hesitation, and I love that. And if they show that confidence that it doesn't matter who they're playing against, like let's get after them type of mentality, then that's when people go, oh, like the old teams used to have this grit and determination and fight. Yeah, but we were also extremely skilled. But we had this chip on our shoulder that pushed us on to be confident against the Italys and the Englands of the world and beating all these teams in Mexico and Brazil. It was more about that. And I think that self-belief, seeing that in the game where they're not hesitant, where we can be comfortable keeping the ball and circulating the ball to create more good chances up front, instead of just being like, hey, we're a team that's picking up the loose, scrappy ball, fighting in the midfield, getting the second ball, and now we're creating stuff from there in a transition moment. I think people want to see like that confidence level to actually push the game and dictate it ourselves.
What if that is the case and you're a manager, what are you saying to these guys? How are you orchestrating the team to try to bring that out of them?
Well, I think it's more about like these dynamic advantages, you know, like a Tyler Adams next to a Weston McKennie with maybe, you know, Christian Pulisic in front of them. All three of them connect really well. And so in that part of the field, there's that really that confidence to keep the ball. And that's what when you break the lines of pressure in all games, whether you break it with the first pass, second, or third, when you get to that third pass, teams just kind of drop off. They go like, you know what, they're picking us apart individually, and we don't want to high press anymore. So they drop off. Now you have more time to space to play, and the players that interpret that quicker, they're going to be more successful there. Now it might be a tactical game plan from a national team. Greg Berhalter might think, you know what, let's attack their fullbacks. Maybe they're very good coming forward, but they leave too much space in behind. Let's get after that space early on and go direct right now and push it down their throats. And that's part of a game plan as well. And then after that, you can start to create. But to me, I think it's tactically picking apart the opposite team. Where are their weaknesses? Where are we going to exploit them? And just say, okay, let's overload in this space in the field and give their guys confidence enough to keep the ball and overload and combine in those spaces. When they do that, that shifts the whole team. You know, it shifts it all over the field in terms of tactical moment.
Now that we have our roster, now that we know the guys that are in Qatar, in training, et cetera, Coach, what if I asked you to give me a biggest strength and a biggest weakness that might be exploited, especially in group play by two very good teams out of the gate in Wales and England, what would you label as the biggest strength and the biggest weakness for this team, in your opinion?
Well, I think one of our biggest strengths is our quickness, our speed. I think we have a lot of quick players on the field. You know, you look at Pulisic and Aronson and guys that can not just, you know, in terms of just pure speed, you know, even like a Jesus Ferreira up front or, you know, Luca de la Torre, how quick he is running with the ball and decision making. So I think the speed factor for us, you know, we could probably outrun Wales without a doubt, fitness levels too, you know. And the fact that we missed the World Cup in 18 and now we're back in 2022. Now I know Wales, it's the first time they've been at this stage in a long period of time and they're going to come out. But I think our guys kind of come into it with a different mindset than Wales, more so like, we're going for broke now. We're back again. Let's show them what we're all about. Instead of being like a Wales where they might be like, wow, this is the first time, sort of like how we were in 1990. Wow, this is the first time we've been back at the world stage in 40 years. Well, I think it's 64, if I'm not wrong, with Wales, you know, being at the world stage. So this could be an unknown territory for them, Rob. And the U.S. has to have the right mindset to take advantage of that.
It's interesting, Coach, because you mentioned that. I mean, look, Wales is a very proud country with a very proud football supporter base, but you're right. The team has not been there really. Well, I was going to say really like it's a shock since the birth of any of the players that are on it and probably the birth of some of their parents. So this is very foreign territory, despite the fact that we missed 18. We've obviously been there, and guys within the USF program have this experience, etc. Is there some level, is there some lesson that can be taken from some of the old guard that were around 8 years ago, whether they're on the administrative side or the coaching side, etc.? Is there some element of that as a manager you're trying to capture to go up against the team that has not been there in 6 decades?
Yeah, and that's the thing too, and it all comes back to what is the mindset of your group, you know? And that's what it is in terms of coaching and managing. Like we all talk about the X's and O's and the tactics and stuff like that, but the emotional connection to the player is very important. So getting to know, like if I'm managing you, Rob, it's like what's Rob Brown?
You are in a world of hurt if you're managing me, coach.
Roster
selection must
managing
have
Rob
been
Brown,
desperate.
it's a lot different than managing Bruce Springsteen, who's had all this success at the world stage. But no, it's like if I'm going with Rob Brown, it's like, well, Rob, he's a tough nut to crack. Like he is when that whistle blows, look out, get out of his way. Like he'll fight for everything. He's a terror. Then you're like, okay, I have this player that has this mindset. Let's give him the ball, or let's put it in this part of the field. And that's where we can take advantage of maybe their center backs, where maybe you got a young center back in the Welsh team that has been playing lately and's got some confidence, but then he gets up against this Tasmanian devil of a player and he struggles. And so those are the type of things you got to think about. Not just, hey, can we be neat and tidy and keep the ball against Wales? Okay, that's great. But we have to have possession with a purpose. So who's going to hurt them on that side? Is it, is it Weston McKennie? Is it, Arena? Is it a Musa that comes in and is a little bit more physical, even if he's a younger player, or Tyler Adams that holds down the 4 as a 6 and sits there and orchestrates the game? Or is it going to be like, hey, it might be 0-0 for a long period of time, and we need guys like Tim Ream and Aaron Long and Height that are really good in the box, and let's do it on a set piece goal. But as long as we defend our 18, we need to make sure that we are a clean sheet team. Like, I think we can beat Wales. I really do. But I think it's going to be a game like 2-1. And I got to study Wales a little bit more, to be honest with you. I got to go through their roster a little bit more and look at it. But having said that, it's like they could be a team that we can go and get that first victory. And if we do, man, that's the biggest lift in the world. It really is.
Yeah, how important is that, Coach? And I want to get to more of the X's and O's here in just a minute. But from the perspective of these players, what is the difference in mentality if they come out on Monday and walk out of that one with the full 3 points and know that they've given themselves a leg up? How much does that change the way that you're willing to attack England on Friday?
Wow. Man, it's a tough one. There's a lot that goes into it because, I mean, look, I think there's a lot of the mental game too, Rob. It's not just like individual players and stuff like that and the experience that they have, but it's also the mental game. It's like, can we come out of the gate and get a win first off? Like now, when we were playing in '94 World Cup, our first game was against Switzerland, and it was in Detroit in the indoor dome. And we knew it was going to be difficult. Like the conditions were going to be difficult because it wasn't like a circulating air there. It's still going to be hot and moist and warm. It's going to kind of weird. They brought in the grass field in hexagonal shapes and connected it. So guys were slipping everywhere and stuff. So you think about those elements first. Then you go, okay, now let's look at Switzerland. And they're a quality side. They've got a lot of experience, older veteran players on the field. But we're like, okay, well, we can fight with them and manage that part. That's not a big deal. But like, how are we going to score? And so getting that first, we got the point. It was a 1-1 draw with us in '94. In 1990, we lost 5-1 to Czech Republic, which was a disaster for us. We were just like, wow, we just got, it was like that knockout punch, in a boxer. We just got hit early in the second round. It was like, wow, welcome to the World Cup. But we recovered from that, and we went in against Italy, and we almost drew 1-1 with the host country in the Olympic Stadium in front of 76,000, Italians. And we lost 1-0, but it was close. And it was more about like, what can we gain from this to build for our club, our national team bigger for, the next tournament. But here the U.S. is coming into it saying, no, we want to put our stamp out right away. We want to beat Wales. So for me, I think it's like, guys, get your team geared up for this first game. Get those 3 points, secure that as hard as you can, and it will be a massive lift for the rest of that round in that first round group.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting, Coach, because when you're talking regular season football, club football, even some other tournaments, you've got some opportunity to build the confidence of your club. In a World Cup, it's not. I mean, you need to be confident out of the gate, and I think there's a lot of people who are concerned about the confidence of this team after that last round of friendlies. But I also know that there is, we've heard the comments from Christian Pulisic about how disappointed he was. We saw the pain in his face. I won't forget after that last draw that kept us out of the World Cup back 5 years ago. The image of Pulisic breaking down in tears on the pitch when the other scores came in to let him know they weren't going. And I think there's been, or at least it's felt to me, Coach, and maybe I'm being an optimist in the red, white, and blue here, that there is a little bit of an edge, a little bit of an anger, a little bit of some reckoning that especially these young guys want to come out there and prove. They don't have the multiple caps like we did when we were sending Donovan and Dempsey at the World Cup level. These are guys that are showing up to try to kick down a wall. Is that something, if you're in Greg Berhalter's shoes, are you trying to kind of bottle that? Or is that something you're going, I want you boys to go out there and let them know you've arrived?
I think you kind of, it's a tricky one. I mean, look, there's certain respect, obviously, for teams that have come before you. If you don't understand the history in the game in the past, and you don't respect that, then it's hard to know where you're going as a team, as a unit. And I think that Greg Berhalter is a good guy to actually bring that to those kind of discussions, those kind of conversations to this team. But I also think that too, there is that balance, Rob, of finding moments of whether it be in certain training sessions on a day, like maybe if, just for an example, you're kicking off on Saturday, do you go cautious with them on Wednesday and say, hey, we got to be respectful, this is how we play, and then on Thursday you're building it up until Friday you go, hey, we've got this, we're ready to go, and now that mentality is we're switching on of like, no, we're in charge now of this game. No, you guys know what you're about. And that's that kind of belief. It's that Ted Lasso self-belief kind of approach. And it's not bullshit. It's true. And there's a lot of people that actually kind of respond to that in a very positive way. So I think that that's the kind of approach that might really suit this national team very well, especially against some Wales veteran players. But are they all playing at high levels? Not all of them. Okay. And some of them are even in Scotland with my son, and one of his teammates, Dylan Levitt, is a 21-year-old center midfielder, plays with my son Ian at Dundee United. He's on the Wales roster too. And I don't think he'll get a lot of playing time, but good, clever player, but younger. But I think this is a kind of team that they're going to really depend a lot on their veteran players to kind of experience this game. And I think it's like, okay, that's great and all, but our young players that have believed in themselves and have gained 3 or 4 they've been weathered with seasons overseas, they're ready to play. I think this is the second, if I'm not wrong, Rob, this is behind our 1990 team. We were the youngest team, I think, to go to a World Cup on a U.S. national team process. I think this is the second youngest team, just beyond us in terms of like players under 23. So I think sometimes you let them go, man. You release them and let them go.
Coach, you compare and contrast this to the last couple of times we've had decent runs to the World Cup when we really were a veteran team relying on the Landon Donovans, the Clint Dempseys, the Tim Howards to kind of be the stalwarts, guys who had been there a couple of times and done that and been through the adversity, etc. This time around, we don't really have a lot of that. It's a lot, like you mentioned, a lot of younger guys, a lot of guys who have played at the highest level, at the Premier League level, certainly at the top tier of the MLS level, but maybe not at the top level of international play. But these are also guys that have played in the CONCACAF Champions League, and they've played in Copa America and these other smaller but still large tournaments that have taken place. So I would assume that you would want to kind of utilize the lack of baggage that they would have with some previous veterans, but still understand that these guys have played a lot of the players that they are going to be seeing wearing international shirts next week.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think there's a lot of that, Rob, that I think Greg and the coaching staff have done pretty well with is like bringing like a guy like Tim Ream, who's 35 years old, and mixing him in with a younger player like Yunus Musa, who's 19. They have that kind of balance in there. And I look, Clint Dempsey's and Tim Howard's and Landon and all these guys, absolutely fantastic players. I mean, brilliant. What they bring to the table, the confidence level, um, the skill sets and everything else. But I do think there's a bit more of this. It's pretty good balance. Like a Walker Zimmerman is now, and I think Walker Zimmerman started to show me probably about 8 or 9 months ago, like he's one of the leaders in this group without a doubt. And you got to lean on him heavily as a center back who has done extremely well at Nashville, a good club in the MLS and an expansion club. And then like a guy like Aaron Long, not as proven as much at the national team level, but still has done extremely well. You got to find ways of getting guys that lead in their own way. And a Christian Pulisic, yeah, don't force the leadership on him. You don't have to have an armband on you to lead. You can lead by example, and sometimes there's vocal leaders and stuff. So I think there's a really good blend of players that are in this group. They have that balance, Rob, from top to bottom. And sometimes I don't know if it's baggage or you're bringing guys that, you look back on the last World Cup and people look on that in a negative view that we didn't make it. There's a lot of nations that don't make the World Cup, but there's still a lot of good quality players that were on that qualifying roster that have come out of it, and you've got to spend time looking at that too.
Talk to me a little bit about that leadership mentality. One of the things that I, as a both an analyst and just a fan of the Greenville Triumph at USL League One level where you're managing right now, one of the things that I've loved watching about this team is that directly and indirectly interacting with the club, it never feels like there's that one guy that's kind of the leader of the team. It never feels like there's that one guy that is being relied on to carry this club. It's always kind of felt like there are different leadership roles and everybody within the club has one. With the U.S. team, obviously, Christian has kind of been put forward as Captain America. He's the new face. He's effectively filling that Landon Donovan role. There are guys like Gio Reyna, because of their experience, they're expected to come in and kind of be that Clint Dempsey secondary, but fiery, emotional on the field guy. Do you think that having those hopes / maybe expectations placed on a few individual players, I guess I should ask, how do you think that will impact those players when they are hoisted into the biggest tournament in the world starting Monday?
Yeah, I think, they will show you who they are and what role they want to play, Rob. Sometimes the player's character and personality traits kind of reveal themselves under pressure and you see what they're like. And, to me, it's like you give it to a player that's they have that consistency about them, and I think Zimmerman is that guy that has that consistency about him. And I think that, a lot of other guys have gone in and out of form, but also with injuries. There's times where Pulisic has worn the armband. There's times where maybe, I can't remember if Tyler Adams has, maybe. I don't know if he has. He's kind of young. He's 23, but he just sits in that central position. So he has this consistency about him. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's the guy that's going to be on the field, the guy that sometimes is that vocal leader, that knows when to step in and say the right things to lift the team through the adversity, through the hard times. That's what you really want. And look, at the end of the day, there's going to be guys that are comfortable just speaking and just shouting and saying, hey, this isn't good enough. And that's good. You need that. But sometimes it's like knowing when to say it, not just what you say. Knowing when to say it is like the most important. And, I think it was Arnold Palmer was one of the top golfers in the world, obviously, who had always said that. He's always saying, like, knowing not just when, like what you say, but when to say it is the most impactful. That's where, you can get that proper leadership from.
John Harkes is the head coach of the Greenville Triumph at the USL League One level. He's also a veteran of the U.S. men's national team, playing in 2 separate World Cups, joining us here on the Rob Brown Show podcast edition. Coach, we've got a Monday kick. And I know we kind of dabbled in this a little bit earlier with, an odd World Cup schedule, playing it November instead of the summertime, playing it coming off of a much shorter break between club play and the World Cup. Obviously playing it in much different circumstances than any other World Cup in history. And we kind of dabbled on it a few minutes ago, and I wanted to circle back around. As players, obviously, especially if this is your, if you're a Ronaldo or a Messi and you're playing in your third or fourth World Cup and you've kind of developed a solid protocol, a solid rhythm within the World Cup schedule, and now all of a sudden that gets thrown off entirely. Is there a chance that this could benefit an American side that has a bunch of guys now with international experience, maybe more than the Americans have had in a very long time, but kind of level the playing field now that you're in a spot where literally every team going to this World Cup is having to do it in a way that they have never experienced before? Is that potentially something that could benefit the Americans?
Yeah, I do. I think so, Rob. I think it's a really, good insight on your part to bring up, because, a lot of teams in the world won't have this kind of MLS experience that our guys have had, and the percentage of players that represent the Major League Soccer in our country, they finish up in November and then they get a week off, to recover. And okay, could that hurt them? Could they be fatigued from a long year in MLS? Yeah, but at the same time, they're also freeing up their mind, and they could turn the focus to just the national team and the World Cup. That could be a big, big bonus there for sure. As it, conversely speaking about Wales, there's a lot of guys competing, and who, going into this World Cup, Rob, how many guys, and we haven't talked about this yet, how many injuries are there from guys playing and competing? And man, I mean, you look at France right now in their World Cup center midfield, Pogba and, Conte are completely out. And then another player got injured yesterday, and another one gets injured last night. And you're like in training. And I think guys are like, Sadio Mane, who's playing at Bayern Munich, and he's like, oh, I go down with an ankle injury. And people are like, oh, he's out of the World Cup now. And then, no, he's not. He's going to play. He's fine. So it's like all this anxiety of getting to the World Cup, but being healthy, I think is really a big key. And like you said, guys have played, 9 to 10 months in an MLS league. They're finished. They got through it. What an incredible final it was as well. LAFC against Philadelphia Union, 3-3, and going into penalty kicks in overtime was just very entertaining game. But I think it's behind them now. You know what I mean? And they're able to do that. And it's funny, Gareth Bale might be the only guy on the Welsh team that's like, I experienced that. But he's been everywhere too. And he's had injuries. He's 33, I think he is right now. And so you don't know what his health is like. I think this team at the end of this has a little bit of an advantage coming in and being healthy right now, being able to recover, and having good, solid training sessions, but not overstretching them, not overloading them, and building it up for this first game.
Let's talk one more spot on the pitch, Coach, and then I kind of want to talk a little bit about this World Cup from the perspective of how it impacts American soccer. Obviously, that back line. I mean, the focus, as it is with every sport in an American mindset, is always going to be about the guys who are scoring. It's always quarterbacks and wide receivers and never offensive linemen. Let's talk a little bit about the back line here, because there have been some spots where the back line have found themselves in a little bit of trouble, but you've got some guys like Cameron Carter-Vickers, who there's been some excitement built up about. Serginho Dest playing over in AC Milan, getting some really good time there. Just what's your perspective on the back line? Because while, London may not, or England, may not have the most solid striking units that they have had in the past, they're obviously a very, very aggressive team in the way they tactically push you. We know what Gareth Bale is capable of when he catches on a heater. What is this back line? Are you optimistic that the foundation of whatever we do, starting across the guys that are going to be in front of Matt Turner, have they earned some level of trust for you, or do you think that's a spot that the Americans are going to need to be making adjustments on the fly with?
I think it might be the latter. I think they might have to make some adjustments, and I don't. Well, I don't want to make it sound so easy, like it's easy to do and make adjustments on the fly and change out players here and there, because you need to have chemistry and understanding as well. And that foundation to defend. And let's be clear, defending starts at the first player up front, the striker. So whoever that is, that's the defensive shape. That starts right away in transition moments against teams in the World Cup. How are we squeezing the game and making it predictable? That starts up high. If we're in a 4-3-3, then it's our two high wingers and that one striker. If it's in a 4-4-2, it's the two strikers. How do they share that space? And then the block four underneath. But I would say this: the number one thing is for Greg Berhalter, who's the keeper? Okay, because if you look at, they overlook Zach and they don't select him. He's at Middlesbrough now in the English Championship, one level below the Premier League. They got Matt Turner, they got Ethan Horvath, and Sean Johnson. Ethan's got some experience. They're all kind of like 28, 27. I think Sean Johnson might be the oldest one at New York City FC, right? 33 years old. But who is that guy? And to me, it's like Matt Turner went over there and got a lot of experience coming from New England Revolution, gets transferred and bought out by Arsenal. And you're thinking to yourself, wow, he's playing in group games and Champions League and all that stuff. It's like phenomenal. But then he had a slight injury. So for me, I think Matt Turner is your first guy, you go with, like, a lot of experience, high level, did well in the World Cup qualifying as well when he stepped in and was available. And then building it around like a Sergio Dest and Walker Zimmerman. How does Anthony Robinson play into that as a left back? Is that your secure left back? Cameron Carter-Vickers, I see a lot of, because I watch my son in the Scottish Premiership, and he's with Celtic, and he's done a good job, playing there as well. So it's me. To me, it's more about like the experience there. And I would like to see a back four of like a Dest, a Walker Zimmerman, maybe. It's either Tim Ream as that center back, who's done extremely well at Fulham, and then Anthony Robinson, but maybe Cameron Carter-Vickers pushes his way in there at some point. But I think those four, they went through qualifying a lot too. And so that relationship building is really important, that trust that's there in that back four. But Tyler Adams, if he's going to sit as the lone holding six sitting in front of him in the midfield, he's the key to that cog too. He'll protect those two center backs. And if you're up against a Harry, Kane, I mean, you got to block the passing lanes to this boy first, number one. You can't let him just have free reign and turn and run in at center backs all day. So he's a quality player.
All right, I want to shift the paradigm. We got just a couple of minutes here left with Coach John Harkes, head coach of the Greenville Triumph, USL League One level, and former international player for the American side, 2 World Cups in 1994. Coach, you have watched the development, the evolution of this game at every level in America for obviously a number of years now. And, I've talked about on my radio show in the past that the very best thing for any team, any sport is to be good at it, right? Like, Americans love a winner above everything else. That is why the women's team has obviously, you go out during Women's World Cups and you'll see more Alex Morgan jerseys than you would have seen even Landon Donovan jerseys at his prime. There is a direct connection between, or at least in my opinion, and I'll get you to tell me if you feel the same way. There is a direct connection between the excitement and the growth of this sport in a country where it is considered, like it or not, a secondary sport. A connection between success at the international level and the growth of the sport. When Donovan and Dempsey and Howard had that beautiful play, that last second goal a number of years ago that pushed us into the knockout round, there was a surge in excitement. Guys started calling the radio show and wanted to talk about it more than just, hey, we made it. How important do you think it would be, or how beneficial could it be for American soccer, for getting more kids to say, I don't have to play football because that's the way it's always been done, but soccer is an accepted sport now? How big would it be for the Americans to make a run, say, deeper than the first round of the knockout phase, maybe get to the second round, maybe fingers crossed into the quarterfinals? How beneficial would that be for American soccer as a whole and for clubs like the Greenville Triumph to kind of grow the pool base of players around the country?
Yeah, it's huge, Rob. It would be massive, to be honest with you. To not just get out of our group, but to go and get through that next round would be massive. And look, you don't want to be foolish. You don't want to get ahead of yourself. The number one thing and priority is to get out of the group. We get that. We understand that. But the impact that it could have on the game in our country is huge. And we've seen on the women's side so much success, what they've had, and it's been absolutely brilliant, what they've been able to accomplish and huge. And now the men's side, we came close to that, and that was with Bruce Arena's team in 2002. You get to the quarterfinal stage, and it's phenomenal. And the repercussions and the positive influence it has on the game, especially in our divisions, in all our divisions here, whether it be USL Championship, USL League One, Major League Soccer, even the grassroots level. The interest is there. There's more of it. There's a buzz that's in the mainstream, and it's huge, and that pushes the game on to another level. And it even not just from fans perspective, from a business perspective, it pushes you on, because now you got more people that are interested, that have the money, that want to be owners, that want to do it right. They want to push into the game as well. And so that impact could be absolutely massive. It really could be.
If we were to capitalize this, right? Like I have for years kind of taken my role as radio broadcaster. I do what I can to try to push soccer in the communities that I'm in, whether it's been in Florida Panhandle or here in the upstate of South Carolina, etc. But from a fan perspective, especially the hardcores that are, calling off of work on Monday because the U.S. has got a World Cup match, etc. What can folks like that, what can folks within U.S. soccer be doing, especially during the World Cup, do you think, to try to get more hooks in, to get more people to pay attention, so that if and when we make that deep run like we hope we do, the eyeballs are already there? What would be your thought, your advice, as somebody who is even more invested than even the great Rob Brown at pushing soccer within a particular community?
It's hard to get guys like that, Rob, to what you do, because you push the game so hard with everybody, and you're always trying to support the game in your own way and get it out there. And I think we're all doing that. That's the purpose, right? We're all trying to grow the game in certain ways, and we all have responsibility to the game. We love it. And whether you're growing it with a new club, or you're growing it on your show, and you're trying to reach audiences that are outside of that kind of ripple pond effect, and it's a constant. And look, it's part of, I think it's part of the job, what we do, as we all push the game at different levels, whether you're growing it in USL League One or a Division III in this country. You want to make sure that foundation is strong. You want to get more teams. You want to get more ownership groups. You want more fans in the stadium. And we've talked about this, you and I, a lot with Greenville Triumph and USL League One. Like, we want to sell out our stadiums as much as we can. And sometimes it's a challenge, because you're in Clemson football country, and so there are distractors there, or there's other events that are pulling you away. But we have to just continuously just preach the gospel, my man. We've just got to get it out there. And the more you spread the good word about soccer and what we're doing in our country, and the better it's going to be. It just takes time. It takes time. Like, I was trying to explain to you and a couple of guys, and Doug Irwin I was talking to, and I'm like, one year, I think it was maybe 4 years ago, it might have been just before or after the first season of USL League One and Greenville Triumph. One of my old clubs, Sheffield Wednesday in the Premier League, asked me to come back over for their 150th and celebration. And I'm like, I put that in my mind. I'm like, 150 years old for a club. And everyone's like, we're complaining about things need to be better in our divisions and our leagues and stuff. And we're just starting, we're trying to do catch up here on the men's side. We're catching up to the rest of the world. Whereas on the women's side, the national team, they kicked it off, and the rest of the world were following the U.S. women about winning World Cups, and whoa, look at that equality in sport, and look at the opportunities that are out there for the women to play soccer. Like, you talk about that in England 10 to 15 years ago, they're like, what, you crazy? No chance. And now it's everywhere in the women's game. So now the U.S. women have a tough time because everyone's caught up to them. So we've still got a lot of catching up to do in terms of the history of the game, and going back to the first World Cup, in 1930, and how many have we actually participated in. So we've got to do well. We've got to build it up, and it's going to take time.
One thing I wanted to throw in here before we get out of here, Coach, I noticed a conversation. I'm not sure how much of it, if any, you've seen, but the Welcome to Wrexham show, where Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney from Always Sunny purchased a third tier soccer club in a little bitty town in Wales and made an FX TV show out about it. Now all of a sudden, that club can't keep inventory in stock. They got a multi-billion-dollar company in TikTok to become their shirt sponsor. They are selling out their stadium constantly, and it is because of the addition of Rob and Ryan to that group. And while Ryan Reynolds is only slightly more celebrated in the celebrity world than I am, I think things like that are hugely beneficial to the game. And then when you pair that onto success, I mean, at the end of the day, we gotta win. You pair things like that together. Look at the incredible success, you mentioned it earlier, of Ted Lasso, right? Which is not even a show about American football. It's about second level British football that there's an American twist to with Ted Lasso and Coach Beard, and it has become a phenomenon amongst even not soccer fans. Courtney, my girlfriend, not a huge soccer head. She likes it because I like it, but she is addicted to both Wrexham and Ted Lasso. I mean, Coach, it feels like that change that some of us have been waiting for decades, really, as far as American soccer to evolve is here, and pop culture is coming along for the ride. But the World Cup, success at the World Cup would be a really nice exclamation point for that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And we always want to be in it, right? First, you got to be in it. You got to be in there, to kind of win it, they say. But the exclamation point on it, I think there's been such a black cloud over us on the men's side. Not qualifying for that 2018. I think it hurt a lot of business and love for the game and growth for the game in this country. So yeah, it feeds off of that, Rob, at the highest level. If we can get some success here, have a good run. Look, believe me, I don't want anybody listening to our podcast thinking that we have this like easy, group to get out of. It's not. England is phenomenal. You think about the players that are in these teams, and God, the Mason Mounts and the Declan Rices and the Harry Kanes and the Marcus Rashford. And I mean, it's nonstop. I mean, with these guys, and that's going to be a challenge, man. Can we get after their back line? Probably, with the injuries they've had, but defending them is going to be difficult. But overall, big picture, your question: can we do well in this World Cup and get some positive vibes and reverberations after that to then transcend that down through our country into all the levels of the game in this country, and even through the mainstream and the business, corporations and TV deals and all of that, the partnerships that are there. Let's hope so. If we can do that, man, we just continue to grow this game in our country, and we love it.
John Harkes is a two-time World Cup veteran. He is a member of the National Soccer Hall of Fame, the first American to play at the English Premier League level. He is also the winner of 2 MLS Cups with DC United and is now the manager of the Greenville Triumph right here in the upstate of South Carolina at the USL League One level, semi-finalist this year, and hopefully coming back for more. Coach, you are the best. I have enjoyed this tremendously, my man. I appreciate you taking a few minutes. Thank you, boss.
Rob Brown, I got time for you all the time, my man. Whatever you need. Love being on your show. Thank you for having me, and great to have this discussion. Let's do more.
Done it, man. Absolutely done. Make sure that you, if you are in the upstate, are getting ready to buy those Triumph season tickets for next year, because next season's just a handful of months away. I want to thank Doug Irwin, Chris Lewis, Joe, all the guys over at the Triumph for helping us get this set up. I love, Coach, that, and I've said this to you many, many times, I don't know that I have been around a professional sporting club that has ever cared as much about being involved with the local community as the Greenville Triumph. And this is a part of it, from Joe all the way down to Doug, to Chris, to you, to the players themselves. So we appreciate everybody over there under that crest. And hopefully some good vibes, as you mentioned, out of this World Cup will impact all of us positively, my man.
I agree. And I'm very fortunate and, grateful that I get to work with guys like, Chris and Doug and Joe Irwin, his family, that support us. And, building this club for the community is the number one thing we talked about. That was the vision statement, from 2018 going into our first year in 2019. So Don't think for a minute that I don't appreciate that on an every day I get to work for this club. It's awesome. I love it. I love the fans. I love seeing you there at games and supporting that process. And we just got to continue to keep building, man. Hopefully, we got some good news coming soon with the new stadium. That would be exciting. And that second time, let's get back in there and push that vote. So yeah, a lot of big things on the horizon. So we just got to keep that positivity going forward.
Looking forward to a big time breaking news segment on the Rob Brown Show. Coach, you're the best. We'll talk to you soon, big dog.
All right, Rob. Take care, my man.
You got it. That is John Harkes. We appreciate his time very much, and he will be back on the Rob Brown Show sooner rather than later. Thanks for listening. Make sure you follow us on social media at The Rob Brown Show, and you can grab this podcast and every other podcast at thefanupstate.com. Click on the podcast button, drop it down to the Rob Brown Show, and we put up every single show right there. We will see you guys next time.